Request everyone to please take your seats. We are starting the session. Today's session is about how is the Southeast Asian non-ferrous market poised for future. Since last 2 days, we have been listening about the measures taken by European and other countries for non-ferrous metals, and India being one of the biggest buyers, along with many Asian countries. Let us discuss and let us analyze how we are poised for our future demand. Sufyan, can you please play the opening video? So we are going to have this session in a simple format. Mr. Cheelin from Argus Media will be coming and giving us the presentation about how our markets are poised and how Asian countries are doing in non-ferrous metals, followed by our panelist, Mr. Jain Jain, Mr. Naveen Sharma, Mr. Devendra Surana, Mr. Graham, and Mr. Vinay Sharma. To start with, I would like to introduce Mr. Chin Hin Ling, Asia editor, having a vast experience of 15 years in Argus Media. Argus Media is a leading PR agency providing market intelligence for metal, steel, energy, agriculture industry. Mr. Chin, please take a seat. Now, I would like to call upon the stage Mr. Jayant Jain, owner of GR Metals. GR Metals is one of the largest aluminum producer in the country, having a production capacity of 60,000 tons, 2 units in Ahmedabad, planning to open 1 more unit, and also planning to come into wire rod business, having a turnover of 1,200 crores with 800 employees. Now I would like to call Mr. Naveen Sharma on the dais. Naveen Sharma ji is Executive Committee member of Executive Director of Gravita India Limited, one of the few listed companies in this metal space, recycled metal space, one of the best companies which has been following all the systems like EPR, SAP since long in this industry. Now I would like to call upon stage Mr. Devendra Surana from Bhagyanagar Copper Limited. Sir is the Managing Director of Bhagyanagar Copper Limited. Company is having a turnover of 1,800 crores, importing, I'll say, one of the India's largest ICW importers, importing around 24,000 tons of ICW every year. Now I would like to call upon stage Mr. Graham. Graham is the Global Head of Non-Ferrous Metals in SIMS. SIMS is having 260 facilities all over the world in the 14 countries. A $7 billion company, having such an eminent panelist with us. Now I would like to call upon stage Mr. Vinay Sharma, who will be moderating the session with me. He is head of GDB in India. Also, GDB is one of the largest paint recycling company and doing good business in non-ferrous metals. I would like to welcome Mr. Chin to set the context for this session. Mr. Chin.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation from MRAI, and very happy to be here. It's actually my first time at any MRAI conference, and I hope this is going to be the first of many. So thank you very much. So today we're going to talk a bit about secondary non-ferrous markets. So I'm going to give a quick update on the price, market development, and some of the thoughts or that may be able to allow the panel, the brilliant brains to do their talking. So Argus is a pre-RA, is a market intelligence provider. We service in the many industry, including energy, fertilizers, chemicals, of course, metals, and net zero and energy transition. We have price reporting, indexation services, as well as consulting and conferences services. So let's get going. Prices. So commodity prices, actually not only metal prices, pretty much all commodity prices have been largely under pressure so far this year, since the turn of the new year, because of many things, including inflation pressure, recession fears, higher interest rates, and more importantly, a stronger US dollar. Aluminium prices have been down particularly for about 7.5% or so. LME aluminium prices as of end of July, while nickel prices actually have been down for more than 30% since the turn of the new year. But copper prices have been a little bit more stable, only down by about 2.5%. It's more supported by the lower inventories and the outputs lower outputs than forecast. However, Cochigo from Chile's actually moved its 2023 average price forecast to around $8,500 per ton from around $8,600 per ton, even though that output and inventories are going to be lower. Now we'll look at some of the scrap prices. So scrap prices were also down, as most of you would know that it typically follow the primary metals prices. But what has been quite interesting is that I think we have been seeing a little bit of a delink from the scrap prices to the LME prices. Aluminium prices, as we mentioned before, that it was down about 7.5%. Scrap prices have been down by about 5 to 10%, while alloy prices have actually moved up because of the higher cost. This case is actually, you see it more on the copper side as well, that copper prices have moved up by about 4 to 5% since the new year, while the copper metal prices on LME have actually moved down, have only moved up by 2.5%. But we can still see that compared to the peak, though, we are still on a slightly downtrend because compared to the peak price so far this year, we are still down about 7 to 8% or so currently. Let's look at I think this is the more interesting one out of the group. Stainless scrap prices compared to nickel. If we can get that back on. There we go. So, yes, stainless scrap price has been, I think, it's the more interesting one compared to the other two. Stainless steel prices have actually moved down by only about 10% or so since the beginning of the year. But remember that in the previous slides that LME nickel prices have actually moved down by about 30%. So there's quite a bit of a differences between the movement over the past 6-9 months or so now. I think the other thing that you want to look at the nickel value in the 304, which is typically about 8% or so nickel, have fallen back from around 70% or have fallen to around 70% or so of LME prices now, compared to about 110 to 120% in 2022 or in the first quarter of 2022. We are actually moving back to around the historical value, which is typically around 65% or so. So we quickly move to the market. What's going on in India, and some of the Southeast Asian countries. Scrap prices, or sorry, scrap imports volumes are rising pretty much for all commodities, for all of the products. Aluminiums, stainers, copper, zinc, they're all rising imports to India. That's partly, of course, because of the effort of every one of you in this room and at a conference that we are recycling more in Indonesia, in India, and production, of course, is coming higher in India. Exports, which I think is something that we don't really look at too much in India. India is typically not a big exporter of scrap, but you will also see that volume is actually also still rising, but volumes are still quite slow, quite small. And I think before I go, I want to move on to one interesting thing, which is something that everyone is talking about, and including in the non-ferrous side. A lot of time in the non-ferrous side, we talk about base metal and all that, but I think one of the things that we have to remember, non-ferrous also include, outside of nickel and all that, it's also include other minor metals, just like cobalt and lithium and all that. And so before I go, I want to bring you to this about battery, about the EV industry in India. That is obviously a booming sector at the moment. So the government has actually cut the incentive in India for buying a new EV, but that actually doesn't stop EV sales in India at all. It's still going up. And it is forecast that India would need about 260 gigawatts of advanced chemistry cell by 2030. But the country doesn't actually produce that much of lithium. And out of that 260 gigawatts, it is expected that about 60% of them will be coming from local production. So where are we going to find that? It's probably going to be from recycling. So my question would be, is India going to become a major battery recycler? Is India going to do more recycling on the battery side? And on the metal and scrap side, we're definitely seeing that they're all under pressure, and at the moment that the value between the scrap prices and the primary metals are delinking a little bit. Thank you very much.
India is producing around 1.5 million metric tons of aluminium every year. With us, Mr. Jain, one of India's largest producers of aluminium alloy ingots. Jain bhai, I have a few questions with you. Seeing the current scenario, what do you see, what do you foresee like 10 years down the line? Today, India's aluminium industry, secondary aluminium industry is mostly catering to automobile sector. Do you see any shift or any changes that from automobile industry we will go to construction industry or maybe in wire rod? Can I have your thoughts on this?
So mainly means in the coming decade also, the driving factor will be auto industry for the secondary aluminum ingots. But along with the alloy industry and the automobile industry, the construction industry will also contribute to a larger sector. Because right now in India, in construction industry, the usage of aluminum is not very much. But now big companies have started using aluminum components for construction purpose. So we feel that the demand from construction sector also will augment the requirement of secondary aluminum ingots in India. In electrification, definitely it will not be used much as it needs the primary aluminum.
Jain bhai, as you are aware, 90% of our requirements are fulfilled through imports, and there are many restrictions imposed by various countries all over the world for not sharing their share of recycled metals. They want to keep it with themselves. Also, India is taking strict steps for standards in aluminium scrap. What is your thought that how the demand of Indian industry is going to fulfill?
See,
No, this question is for
Really?
Jain Bhai. Yeah.
so regarding the BIS standard which are proposed for apply on aluminum scrap, we are strongly opposing that because the BIS standards are not needed. All over the world, the scrap business is done based on specifications given by ISRI, and that is very well serving the purpose of the trade. So, if BIS is implemented, definitely it is going to hamper our business and it will affect the secondary aluminum production in our country. So, we are trying our best that it is not implemented and we continue with the same specification issued by ISRI. Also regarding these coming restrictions on scrap of exports from like European countries have told that from 2024 we will not allow the export of scrap to other countries like which are non-OECD countries. For that also means our association has taken up with the Ministry of External Affairs and we are trying our best so that the scrap continue to come in India to feed our secondary metal industries.
But Jain Bhai, what I think is, like company like yours, I don't see any challenge getting the material because you will be able to fulfill all the requirements of European laws. Don't you think it is the right time for our industries, mostly the informal sector or small companies, who can start picking up the pace and doing all their compliances related to uh, environment and other stuff, so that they can catch up with the laws of European standard and get the material what Europe is planning to give after you comply with their laws?
So what the exact question is?
The question is, do you think that all the Indian companies,
Will-
apart from the big top, should tie up their knots that we should
Yeah,
focus
definitely.
on more responsible recycling?
Definitely. See, the time is coming of recycling means which has to be responsible and sustainable. So whether it is a big industry or a small industry, all have to be responsible and do the best practices in the recycling industries. And this is the requirement of future also for our generations because if we are not controlling the production environmentally,
Yeah.
then it is a problem for us also.
Yes.
So it is in interest of our country, our citizens, that we become more and more responsible and do the best practices in our industry.
Thanks so much.
I would like to
Yeah.
add in this. There are a lot of calm conferences what we did throughout the country. There is an awareness campaign the government of India has launched to go into an unorganized sector to show us the best practices. This has been seeing, what the government of India has done. My very important question to you, Jain Bhai, is presently alloy industry is seeing, downfall worldwide and the scrap prices are increasing. So what is your projection for next 10 years? What will be the scenario? Just please.
So the main reason that right now whatever situation is there that alloy prices are coming under pressure and scrap prices are high, that is mainly because of the after effect of COVID-19.
Okay.
During COVID-19, it has affected the entire economy of the world. On one side, there was shortages of critical raw materials for cars. There was uncertainty of the income. So this has led to changes in the entire supply chain. Whatever the cars were coming to the recycling facility, that was reduced because people were continue to use their old cars because they don't want to spend. Also on the other side, the supply of cars also decreased because of the shortage of semiconductors and other key components. But going forward means we feel that these all challenges has to been resorted to a great level, and in the coming decade the things should run as normal as earlier. So I feel that the prices of Zorba or aluminum scrap as well as alloy will adjust with each other and the demand of ingots and aluminum will be very good in this coming decade due to the expectations from auto industry, construction industries, etc.
Okay, thank you. So let us address the elephant in the room. So the next question is, what about the BIS standards that we are, recently talking about in India? So will this affect the supply, what we'll be getting? So what's your thought on that?
See, BIS standards, if implemented, will definitely hamper our supplies because it is not easy to do that checking everything at the port. Second, the quality of the scrap which they have recommended right now, that is also very strict. But we are trying our best that these standards are not implemented. But my view is that Indian importers also should become responsible and try to import items with lower impurities, because today or day after this type of restrictions will come in India also. So if we become responsible, we try to change the purchase pattern right from now, then maybe we are geared up for that after 2 to 3 years. But definitely means no country will allow material with more impurities.
My last question to you, Jayant Bhai, is how do you see seeing such a big infrastructural change in the country? Lots and lots of demand is coming in this sector. How do you see the capacity expansion in this field in the secondary aluminum sector in the country?
See, right now also means there is unutilized capacity to the tune of 20 to 30% in our country. And in our secondary aluminum industry, the capacity built up is not a big task. The main task is the supply of raw materials and demand for aluminum. So we feel that the demand will be very good. Only we have to ensure that the industries are being fed with the supply of raw materials. And for that we have to make efforts in the future also. Means.
Thank you, Jayant bhai. My next question is from the Gram. Given the ban being imposed by the various countries on export of scrap, how will your company meet and growing demand of Asian countries?
Great question. Firstly, thanks very much for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a great time to be in scrap. There's some fantastic tailwinds behind us, and as an industry and as a supplier and participant in this industry, we see some great opportunities. Sims has had a long presence in Asia. We have a physical office based in Singapore, which I think goes a long way. It demonstrates how important this market is to Sims. We recognise the growing demands of metal in Southeast Asia, India, and surrounding South Asian countries, as well as the demands for metals in Europe and North America. So Sims has locations, as we said, or as you heard in my bio, across multiple countries. 260 scrapyards in North America, UK, and Australia. And I think this gives us a great opportunity to navigate around potential restrictions so we can continue to supply our customer base within each of the geographies that we're already supplying to.
Graham, I have a question with you. Since you said that you have offices in America, UK, and Australia, why Sims has not extended its arms in European countries? Any specific reason for that?
In the European countries? I think that's a question for our CEO.
I have a question to Mr. Devendra Surana. So, you know that Indian copper industry is highly dependent upon imported scrap. We are facing huge shortage of scrap, and there are very restrictive measures being taken up by various countries. How do you foresee that how our country's demand is going to get fulfilled? And many countries like Europe, Japan, even Australia, we have heard that there will be some scrap restrictive trade. So do you foresee that India will be able to come out with its own demand, or we will be able to depend upon imports?
Thank you, Amar and MRI, for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. And definitely, the concerns which you have raised are very valid for the copper industry. As we all know that India is really short of copper. We don't even get 10% of copper in our country. The only way to fulfill the requirement of copper in India is to import. So we can either import concentrate, we can import scrap, or we can import cathode. And from where I see the most efficient way, both energy as well as environment and other cost, scrap is the best way to import. Now the headwinds which India is facing in terms of imports, like you said, a lot of countries are banning export. Countries like Sri Lanka and others have already banned. There is a very high rumor that the entire Gulf will start banning export. We already can't get copper scrap out of Europe. So these headwinds are real danger for all of us. And we need to see how we can maneuver. In fact, luckily for us, our foreign ministry is very strong. So we should also lobby to see that this doesn't happen. So we should use our platform to ensure that this is felt demand. See, while one side countries are banning export, the other side we have a situation where a lot of countries are encouraging exports, like Korea and Japan. They encourage import of copper rather than other raw materials. We, on the other hand, in India, have a situation where there is a negative differential between import of scrap and other raw materials. In fact, scrap is the highest customs paying raw material which is imported into India, unlike Korea and Japan, where the import duty on the scrap is the lowest. So that is one of the big obstacles for growth of copper industry into India. So I think
How do you foresee, one more question to you, how do you foresee that one of the biggest threat for the secondary copper industry in India is the giant Adani Copper, Adani's is getting into this copper business. How do you foresee that? What will be the impact of them coming into this business on smaller companies like yours?
so. Adani's view, the official view is that next year, August, they will start their smelter. And the technology which they have got, the smelter will require a lot of scrap to cool it down. Now, if that really happens, they can consume up to 1 lakh tons of copper scrap in their plant. We really don't know whether they will go to that level. But if they start consuming copper scrap, especially domestically, the difference between scrap and the virgin materials in India is going to shrink dramatically. The availability of scrap will also come down tremendously. But we really don't know whether it will happen because Birla Corp also started using scrap melting in their furnace and then stopped later. I understand from the technology which Adani has got, which is coming from China, that the scrap usage in the furnaces will be much higher than any other furnaces which are coming. It is definitely a danger which is clearly out there.
So my last question to you is, in our today's discussion, I came to know that your company is making best quality of copper and copper alloys from the drosses and waste of copper, which is of no use. You were saying to me. Can you put more light on that?
So I think end of the day, metal processing is not a rocket science. And recovery of metal has been done throughout the ages. So getting the best copper out, whether it is from concentrate or from scrap, you can always reach 99.9% purity if you follow the right processes and if you have the right technology. Obviously, in today's situation, we have to also follow the norms, pollution control norms and other things, if we really have to survive in this industry. It is possible. It requires effort, but definitely there is no rocket science in it. We can all do it.
My next question is to Mr. Naveen Sharma ji. Sir, do you see this EV revolution is coming? At what extent do you think the lead acid battery demand in the coming year? Naveen Sharma ji.
Can I just add one more thing since you're talking about EV? The requirement of copper because of EV and green energy is going to shoot up like crazy. So there is definitely going to be a requirement in the country for copper, which we have never anticipated. And I personally feel that India as a country can take the leadership from China in terms of the overall growth of copper industry globally for the next 10 years, especially with the advent of EV and green energy.
Actually,
Thank
sir,
you for butting in.
what is happening is lead acid battery producers are in fear that the EV revolution will come. So it's a big question that what will be the demand of lead acid batteries in the future.
Okay. So for the when you talk about several years, so I will talk at least till next 7 years, end of this decade, 2030. The lead acid battery demand will remain firm because there are geographical areas where EV is growing faster. If you talk about US or EU, but in India, Africa, or some part of South America, or in Asian countries, this EV is not going to replace so fast. Secondly, EV will come mainly in passenger cars, still, or two-wheelers. But the big vehicles, commercial vehicles, they will be still lead acid batteries. And even in passenger cars, there is one lead acid battery. Is therefore run your ancillaries and other lighting purpose. Secondly, the demand in other sector like storage battery, that will go up because as per capita income go up, you will see the storage, mainly inverter or wherever you have now internet at every house, you will like to have a uninterrupted supply. So that storage area, lead acid battery demand will go up. So altogether, this will be there at least till 2030, and now we have to see how this new technology of EV survive, because there are cases of fire and other infrastructure issues of charging and all. So it will remain firm till at least this decade.
Sir, my next question to you is like in next 10 years, will the demand for lead acid battery will increase or for lithium ion batteries will increase?
See, the base of lithium-ion battery is lower. So if you see, we hear data, it's growing by 300%, 500%. So that numbers will be bigger, but it will remain firm. Even lead acid battery will also go parallel.
Just to inform the audience that Mr. Naveen Sharma is director of MRAI as well, and one of the most important pillars of MRAI. He has been very constantly uh, uh, talking to MOEF, Ministry of Environment Forest, on batteries. So I'll request him to update this audience about what are the EPR regulations and what are the new battery handling
Thank you,
rule
ma'am.
regulations in
So
India.
EPR, see, when we talk about other non-ferrous scrap, particular battery scrap or lead acid battery scrap, there was already a regulation in India which used to be known as BMHR, Battery Management Handling Rule, year 2001. So in 2022, government has brought up a new rule which is known as BWMR, Battery Waste Management Rule. And salient points of that rules are only lead acid batteries were allowed in that rule. In this BWMR, all types of batteries are there. So now they are not classified based on the chemistry, lead acid or lithium, and they are now classified based on the application like automotive, EV, industrial, and you can say movable batteries. So wherever the small batteries, pencil cell, torch battery, they have come another category. EV will be mostly this lithium ion, automotive will be lead acid, and industrial you can see for all industrial application, telecom towers or golf cart batteries, these are there. So this new regulation has an additional point which is known as EPR. Earlier EPR was not there. So the rules are under formation. Ministry of Environment Forest has given responsibility to Central Pollution Control Board to frame a central portal wherein each and every importer, producer, manufacturer of battery has to get themselves registered, and then next stage they are registering recycler. So that process is started. The recyclers portal is under trial. So, and stage 3 they will bring EPR. So the EPR penalty will be enough to motivate manufacturers to get it recycled through a authorized recycler or buy EPR certificates. Like importer of new batteries will not require lead, so they will buy EPR certificate. So I foresee that's a big change will shift where the producers to fulfill their EPR requirement, there will be a good capacity enhancement in the country. And one of our MRAI members who are here, I think I can see 3, 4 big smelters are there. So there's a good opportunity for us to take this advantage of coming EPR into battery industry.
This comes to the next question, sir. So, since Gravita is a very technology sound company, what is your suggestion to for the battery manufacturers or the lead manufacturers to the level playing field or the new technology? What should they be putting into in the production? What are the best practices?
See, when it comes to technology, see, automatically people will invest in technology until they get commercial benefit. So till now we have in India over 1,000 smelters registered as per Ministry of Environment Forest. But there is no benchmarking, though the Ministry of Mines has bought some non-ferrous metal recycling framework, and so do in EPR, Ministry of Environment Forest has put up a minimum capacity requirement to run a smelter. So the technology availability is there in India, and even we as a technology provider exporting our technology of battery breaking to smelting to all countries. We have recently sent project to Australia, Mongolia, Poland. So it will come with the regulation. Moment EPR comes, there will be a delta for manufacturer. They will invest in technology, and that is available in our country itself.
My next question is to Graham. So we are seeing, there are a lot of local consumption. Even the US is coming up, the scrap consumption. They're trying to produce locally. What do you think? Are you able to meet the demands for the US and India and other exports?
Yes, it's an interesting time. Indeed, there's significant investments that have been announced, new projects that have been announced that should come on board over the next couple of years in America, particularly aluminium demand. But I will say that US has always been a strong market for scrap, has always had a strong aluminium demand that's supplying into the automotive industry, into food packaging, sheet production, extrusions going into the construction industry, etc. But yes, it is growing. From what we've counted, there's an additional 2 million tonnes of new cast house capacity coming on in the US. We don't know if that's going to be, well, we know that it won't be exclusively for scrap, but a good chunk of that will require scrap. But the US is still a net exporter. So if, for example, of that 2 million tonnes that's coming on board of new cast house capacity, even if 500,000 tonnes of that consumes scrap, the US is currently a net exporter of 1.5 million tonnes of aluminium. So there'll still be a surplus of aluminium scrap. And I think that's going to be a reality that'll carry on for some time.
My last question to Graham, and after that we will open the forum for the people and delegates sitting in front of us. We have heard that American Critical Mineral Independence Act 2021 is being implemented in America, and scrap is going to being a part of this thing. In the short term, do you see any kind of challenges being faced for the supplies you people are making to India and Southeast Asia?
Well, at this stage, it's hard to speculate whether scrap will be included in that policy. It hasn't been so far. It has been it's been a supportive policy of other industries. It's very much focused around shoring up supply for semiconductor productivity, batteries, materials for EV production. But yeah, it's hard to speculate and say for certain whether scrap will be included in that.
My last question to you is, after COVID-19, you being one of the biggest suppliers to Southeast Asian markets, do you face any kind of challenges with your buyers?
We're very fortunate. We've got some amazing customers across Asia. We've got a great team of people within Sims that vets our customers and works alongside of our customers. So I can honestly say we've never had any significant challenges shipping into this part of the world. There have been some headaches that come up from time to time. And as I said, we're fortunate. We've got very good customers and partners that we work with, and we've been able to navigate through those challenges as they've arisen.
Is your company and other companies who are exporting material to India, are you people planning to poise yourself to the standards which are going to come in non-ferrous metals?
Well, I can see many of our customers in this room here, and as they would all attest, our material is of highest quality.
Since you've seen this in China, now we would like to open the question from the audience. We have a very eminent panelist here. Questions from the audience, please. Yes.
Yeah, Mehul Thakkar from Starry Processes. We are a recycling plant and a processing plant. Actually, I was just the guy in Singapore. He just mentioned in this video, okay, we are going to EV batteries a lot, and how India is going to tackle or how we're going to extract the lithiums. But for the short informations, we already developed the lithium process. We already been done. We can do a good kind of processing, and now we have a good success in lithium also. So maybe in the future we will be also in the same position with the lithium also. So we won't have any problem for lithium batteries too, because we already developed the process in India too. And that's all good. So that was the only information.
Thank
I
you
would
for your
like to share.
information. Thank you. Thank you. Please give the mic to Mr. Dhawan Shah.
Some excellent points made early on. I think just picking on that, my question would be one to the Indian panelists here, Mr. Jayant and Mr. Surana as well. You see, as part of the growth we've seen in Asia, a lot of big Chinese consumers went into integrating supplies as part of their businesses. So being as consumers, they've picked up assets in overseas, in Europe and US. Do you think in coming times, as a business model that you have, that adds value or that could be a way forward? So question number one to you. And then I'll probably go to Graham to say that, while we've been generally talking about the regulatory shifts that are happening and how business is changing because of that, but I'll probably point at something which is more of a technological shift. And in aluminium industry, one of the most remarkable things that I've heard, which is kind of, about to shift the tectonic plates of how technology can get involved into our business, is about Alcoa making this big announcement of extracting pure metal out of Zorba. So as one of the world's biggest processor, what are your thoughts on that? Is that the revolution that we are looking at? I mean, is it a feasible, long-term sustainable way of going as far as recycling is concerned? So maybe the Indian side can answer first, and then Graham can give his inputs on that.
So thank you, Dhaval, for that question. Securing our raw materials is really a big problem. And as a lot of people in this room know, that it's become more and more difficult to get raw materials in India in spite of very high availability because of whatever reasons there are. Going abroad and setting up our, say, yards or collection centers and mini processing plants to ensure that the copper comes in the right form is definitely a way to go forward. And the way shortage of raw material is happening, it might become imperative, especially for the big organized players, especially as far as copper is concerned, because of the very low quantity of copper available in the ore form in the country. So I think that is becoming an imperative for all of us.
Same means, like if we want to increase our sourcing and all, then definitely we will have to set up our offices maybe in overseas country. And if the requirement is very huge, then we may have to set up yards also. This is what we are seeing, like many Indian companies have already set up their offices for purchasing and in US or Dubai like that. So going way forward means as the requirement is going to be tremendous. So, and on the other side means the supply is not going to that tune. So definitely we will have to take steps to feed our plants.
We can take.
Jayaprakash from
Yeah,
Steel
go
Mill.
ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
I have a question for Jayan sir. It is related to aluminum market. So for last 1 year, I guess secondary aluminum manufacturers are struggling for export, especially into China and Japan. And also it has impacted the scrap suppliers from UK and USA and also from the Middle East.
Can
So
we take this
ADC
question
12
later? Jayaprakash, can we take this question later? Graham has to answer the question of Mr. Dhaval Shah.
Yes, sorry. Thank you. That's a great question, and I think it sort of leans on to the question you asked me a second ago, Amar, about quality and the comment that you made before, Jane. I think if you have a look at the flows of scrap and the regulations that have been put in, I agree with you 100% that waste will not, standards for waste will not deplete. That there will be tighter and tighter expectations from countries that are importing scrap. I think that's something that's going to continue to happen. Can't put that one back in the bottle. And that's then led to companies like us and a lot of suppliers around the world who have been working closely with OEMs to try and figure out ways of navigating initially those challenges, but then exploring other ways of extracting more value from scrap so that we can supply the raw materials to our customers that they demand. So yes, we have been looking at a number of different technologies that are available in the market. Are they perfect at the moment? No, but there's some exciting stuff that's coming along. And we've been, as I said, talking very closely to OEMs and trying to understand what sort of additional value those new technologies will enable us to bring to our customers.
Jayaprakash,
Yeah.
can you ask your question, please?
Yeah, sure, sir. Thank you. So this is Jayaprakash from Steel Mill. Sir, my question was just related to the previous one. In last 1 year frame, this question is for Jayan sir. In last 1 year, automobile manufacturer is struggling for export value to Japan and China. And there are a lot of, hundreds of new units have came up in India just to manufacture the alloy ingots. This has also impacted the scrap suppliers in back value chain. So how do you see this automobile landscape is going to change in coming 6 months or in 1 year projections? And what will be your advice for manufacturers also? Because obviously the margins are shrinking.
Yes, it is correct that we are facing with the bad phase of our industry. But as explained earlier also that this is all because of the after effects of COVID as well as due to Russia-Ukraine war also various factors have changed. So one point that the export has been affected very much. So the reason of this is the economy is not working well in other countries also. Like I met various Chinese manufacturers yesterday. So they are also facing the same problem which we are facing. They are doing losses in the business, buying raw material at higher price and selling at lower price. So till the situation is not restored to the normal level, we are going to face this problem, and I feel that this may extend for 1 year more also. So we have to be geared up to face this challenge, but the future is bright.
We'll take one or two maximum questions, then we'll go to the next session, red metals, present and future. So any more questions?
May I request everyone to please be on your seats. Next session is very important. Red metals, coppers, we are going to talk about present and future scenario. May I request Mr. Ashish Bansal and Mr. Navni Chadda to please come forward and felicitate all our speakers. I request everyone to please come forward for a group photo. Now I would like to welcome Mr. Brian Taylor, editor of Recycling Today, for taking the next session ahead. Brian, all yours.
All right, testing, testing. Thank you for the kind introduction. This is, as mentioned, Brian Taylor of the Recycling Today Media Group. Our media group is based in the US, but I work and live in Singapore for Recycling Today. It is my pleasure today to moderate a discussion with 5 distinguished panelists, whom I shall now introduce and ask them to come to the stage as I read their biographies. We'll start with Mr. Mayank Parikh, Director of Jain Recycling Private Limited. Mayank is the, please do applaud, is the director, which is part of Jain Metal Group. The group recycles and makes copper and copper alloys, lead and lead alloys, aluminum and aluminum alloys, and recycles plastic and trades in non-ferrous metals and scrap. To date, Jain Metal Group has carved a niche for itself in the metal recycling and manufacturing sectors. Joining us also is Mr. Reddy Huang, Trade Manager of Ningbo Jintian Copper. Please do welcome Reddy also. Ningbo Jintian Copper Group is one of the largest recycled copper and brass processing companies in China. He has accumulated a great deal of experience in the recycling market and in business management. With a firm that has a foothold in Southeast Asian market, his job is to steadily expand Jintian's business scope and scale along with his team. Please also join us Ms. Jane Chen, CEO of C&Y Global Incorporated. Welcome, welcome Jane. C&Y is a leading non-ferrous scrap metal trading and processing corporation. It has footprints in North America, Asia, and Europe. Ms. Chen is also a board member of the ISRI Gulf Coast chapter in the United States. She graduated from Davenport University in 2001. Let me please now welcome Brad Miller, International Trading Manager, DJJ Singapore Private Limited. Brad has worked in the, oh yes, please, a round of applause is fine also. Brad has worked in the scrap metal and recycling industry for 17 years on both the commercial and operational sides of the business. He joined DJJ 7 years ago and has held several positions, including buyer, facility manager of auto shredding facilities, non-ferrous director for River Metals Recycling, and obviously now his most recent position, international trading manager. Brad served 8 years in the U.S. Army and holds a bachelor's degree in international studies and history. Our 5th panelist, please welcome Jawed Ahmad, Chairman and CEO of Al Quran International. AQI, also known as. Dubai-based AQI is a global trading company and an end-to-end business. Jawad has an MBA in finance, and he's been in the metal recycling business for some 20 years in Saudi Arabia and the UAE. His passion is meeting people and seeking expansion of the recycling business around the world. Thank you all of you again for joining us, and as I say, distinguished panel. I'm here just to ask the questions and anxious to hear from them. Copper and copper alloys have a circular economy business model that goes back millennia. Centuries ago, when our predecessors had something bronze or brass or copper that was no longer useful, there's a very good chance they remelted it and recast it just as we do today. Despite that rather rich circular heritage, today's discussion will be a little linear in that I think we'll move and start with first the supply of scrap as it exists now and may change in the next year or two. Then we'll go to trading issues, and then we'll hit the melt shop or the demand side. Although In addition to being linear, you can think of those as sort of three chasing arrows as one sees in the recycling logo. So I'm going to have a seat and be prepared to ask some questions of this panel. If you don't mind, I'll quickly shift to my seat. Perfect. Microphone is on. Great. I will start, as I said, with one of the supply questions, and all the folks who are in that supply side are welcome to answer this one. Perhaps I'll start with Jean because she's right on my left. But what are some trends in North America or the Middle East or anywhere in the world that your companies do business that could affect the supply and availability of copper scrap in those regions?
I think, from supplier and both from supplier and demanding side, I see the increasing in North American for a few of factors. North American is U.S. is transition into a green economy. So government strongly, actively promote the domestic manufacturing in such like electronic vehicle and solar, wind power, and storage for batteries. All these domestic manufacturing will promote the demand for the copper. And meanwhile, on the supply side, because now we have a lot of investment in the high technology to recycling the metal scrap, so that will increase the percentage of recovery for the scrap metal. Right now, a lot of copper still end up with landfills. So that's what I see, the demand will also increase, supply also increase. The other factor is American also promotes domestic mining. So that always will be a factor to increase the supplier. But also for the, when it reaches the electronic vehicles, which these items are, contain a lot of copper recovery, and when they reach to its end of life, then we'll have more copper to be recycled.
Thank you very much for those well thought out comments. Brad, your company, from what I understand, mostly does business in the U.S., although you're welcome to comment on any part of the world where you see something you'd like to share. But what do you think of the supply side in 2023 and perhaps going forward a bit?
Thanks, Brian. Supply side for DJJ, we're spread across the U.S. And what we really see was kind of spoke about in the last session. We call that a trend toward base metals. A lot of lower grade materials historically have been shipped to Asia are now starting to have the technology available to efficiently and more economically refine them down to a base metal, which is much more tradable, much more easily consumable within the market, not subject to any of the regulations on waste, that sort of thing. So we see that trend towards base metals. The technology's getting very good. We saw like choppers, ICW choppers have really taken off in the U.S. The technology continues to get good, to get better. The economics of scale are really making it cost effective. We see increased need for those materials now on the in the U.S. economy. So I know this is probably going to get into your demand section, but some of the demand that we've forecasted for copper growth into 2025 it's about another 275,000 to 300,000 tons per year. Some of those companies like Ames Copper, Arubis, Veland, Ex-Urban, Igneo, all making significant investments in the lower grade copper recovery plants in the U.S., whether it be a blister plant, a refinery, making anode, cathode. So we really see on the scrap side, we think probably going to have a lot more scrap stay home instead of get exported. And then on some of the other lower grade materials, such as the shredder byproducts, technology continues to grow at a fast pace. I think AI is going to play a big part, and we will see more and more of that scrap stay in the U.S.
I see. That maybe isn't what everybody wants to hear in this room, but maybe we'll get better news out of the Middle East in terms of scrap supply and generation. Would anyone like to comment on that? Perhaps, go ahead.
Hello.
Yes. What can you tell us in terms of scrap generation right now in the markets where you do business, and is it likely to increase? Will there be more metal available? Copper.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, and thank you, MRI, to having me here. If you talk about the Middle East and talking about where we are handling the business at this moment, like UAE, the red metals mainly comes like, copper is main and brass and bronze. If I start from UAE, UAE is one of the biggest consumer or most 4 or 5 consumers who use a huge quantity of copper that the all Middle East coppers can consume there. But issue today that the copper is being exported from across GCC or Middle East. And if I talk particularly about the UAE today, if you look at like almost 4 or 5 smelters who are producing more than 50,000 tons, but mainly they depended on cathode. Reason now, if you talk about the scrap, they wanted to use, but they have like a huge issue with the customer. But I have a good news behind that issue. The mainly like UCR or Ducab or Fujairah Gold or talk with Nuhas, whoever, or in Saudi like Riyadh Cable, Jeddah Cables, Bahra Cables. If you take all those, they are talking about more than 100,000 ton cathode they are using every month. But still, if you look at in UAE or Saudi or Middle East, the most of copper is being exported. The reason behind, they need like a pure copper, and there's no segment where he can, okay, I need to buy the only higher grade, but lower grade, like, the lower like refinery grade has to go out because they don't have refining system in place. So my view that as the ESG is taking place, circular economy taking place, everyone, and he talking about circular economy and ESG, and I was like, let me share some good news. I was having one meeting with a big company. I don't want to take the name, but I guess it's one of the biggest aluminum manufacturer into Saudi Arabia, who have the more than 1 million tons production. I was having a meeting with them and talking about the non-ferrous, especially aluminum and some certain copper. He said, Jayed, I used to be just, talking about only bauxite, alumina, and aluminum. But today, my biggest customer, BMW, he's asking that if you are not mixing the scrap, aluminum recycling metals, my premium is going to be reduced further. So whatever the premium used to get it, if you don't use a certain percentage of aluminum, I'm going to reduce my premium for the next year. And he said, now I used to be used like 15 to 20%, I need to increase 30 to 35%. 30 to 35% using is a huge quantity. So let's say he's using 10,000 ton today, they wanted to import 25,000 ton every month. So this is a good news as a recycler, as a scrap yard processing and company running as a trading company. It to be proud that the times comes today to really focus in our business. Everyone going to salute us to say, hey, you are doing the right job. You are the right guys who are going to really making our life easy for future. Otherwise, it's going to be tough for everyone. Like, you just name it. The whole world are talking about that. So I'm seeing my chance for the copper, these things is going to become with this all smelter or rod manufacturer, that they have to stick with some percentage of the copper he have to mix like a copper scrap. If that happen, I'm seeing big shortage in UAE, as my friends here, the old, the previous panelist was talking about, is going to be banned for sure, but not until they decided or how much percentage they need to use into the copper, any percentage for the next like 2, 3, 4 years. But it's going to become like sooner or later, but it's going to become. So my view for the copper is really a bright future in Middle East. But until having some certain circular economic effect like ESG, I'm seeing little bit challenges. But conclusion is a very good and seeing the copper consumption in Middle East, especially in GCC.
Thank you very much for that roundup, geographic roundup. Anybody else want to add anything to this particular question? If not, I have another supply-related question that I think both Jane and Brad certainly would want to chip in on. And that is, as was mentioned in the previous session, Brussels in particular is trying to make scrap exporting a little more difficult for scrap processors in Europe. At the very least, there will be a lot of forms and audits and regulations and agreements that will need to be in place. And it seems to be already affecting trade and poised to affect it a little more. So as suppliers from the US, how do you see that affecting the North American market? Will overseas buyers turn to America first, or to, for that matter, the Middle East maybe also earlier, because Europe's supply might be getting harder to get hold of? Jane, do you have a thought on that?
Yes. As a supplier in US, I already feel the competitions. And because a lot of buyers used to buy from not only just Europe, but Japan, after they put limitations for wires and a lot of other metals to be limited export. So all those buyers, they try to come to North America to buy more material. So right now, as a supply side, we definitely have more buyers from Pakistan, India, China, and everywhere, you know. And but as a also because our factory in Bangkok, so I also feel my neighbor, you know, they used to be a buyer, only specialized in European wire and Japan wire, and they pretty much, they don't have any material, and so they have to, you know, transform themselves into a U.S. Material buyer. They come to me, and or they try to do some domestic bids, like in Thailand. So that's what I see the changes.
Okay, thank you for that. Brad, what can you tell us from your US-based perspective?
I think Jane's spot on. I think that we'll create some premium for North American metal. I think, though, that the global scrap industry is very resilient. We've all been through different iterations of geopolitical or governmental regulations, and what we've found is that we all go through a bit of a turmoil, and then things kind of resort themselves, and scrap industries is very good at figuring out how to keep material flowing and processing. So I think it's probably more of a problem situation for Europe from my view than it is going to create some big benefit for North American suppliers or the rest of the world.
Okay, anyone else like to comment on the supply situation? If not, I'd like to, we're in Thailand for a reason. I suspect several reasons why the MRAI chose this venue. So maybe I figured we develop a Thailand-specific question. And so for those of you who are doing business in Thailand in some form or fashion, so maybe Reddy, I'll start with you. What do you find, how do you find doing business in Thailand? Has it been good for your company? Has it been a good experience? What can you say about doing business in Thailand specifically?
Hello. Thank you, Brian.
Yes.
Okay. First of all, it's my honor to represent the groups. Our president come here to join the session. Yeah, actually, there are many benefits to do the business in Thailand. So, actually, Thailand offers a lot of advantage for business. Like they have a good transportation, infrastructure, and the worker is trainable. And they have a lot of the strategic land resource. And also the economic is growing very fast. recently. But just now, I think the need is Thailand need more capital and technology. And we just found out from our China custom data last year, about 8% of recyclable copper and brass materials is come from Thailand. It's quite surprised us that we just found. And it is like making it one of the top suppliers around the world in this country. And also recently, we can find out many EV car industry manufacturer and related infrastructure, PCB industry just decide to come to invest in Thailand because they find the potential. So it's likely we can see that the red metals can really expand in this country of the production.
Thank you very much. Now, I happen to know that I had spoken to Mayank earlier, and if you're willing to talk about it, there's also some India-ASEAN region trading issues that may change in the next few years. Do you want to comment about that, about the 2010 agreement and how things have maybe changed a little bit, the way these areas interact?
Thank you, Brian. And am I audible? Thank you, Brian.
Yes.
And I thank MRAI for having me here. So, as far as the trade relation between ASEAN and India is concerned, so there is a trade agreement between India and ASEAN which came into effect sometimes in 2010. And if we talk from the perspective of the red metal, 2010, around that time, the total trade of red metals at that time was somewhere around 700 million US dollar, which now, say financial year 2022, ended with 1.4 billion US dollar. So it appears that apparently it has doubled, the trade has doubled, and it has benefited this region. But if we go into the detail of this figure, at that time when this agreement came into effect, Indian export to ASEAN region as a whole was somewhere around 550 million US dollar, and export of ASEAN region to India was 150 million US dollar. Now, if we look at the situation at the end of 2022, the export from ASEAN region to India grew up to 1.2 billion US dollar, and export from India to ASEAN has gone down to 250 million US dollar, which means what was 150 million US dollar export from ASEAN to India has gone up to 1.2 billion US dollar, and Indian export has gone down from 550 million US dollar to barely 250 million US dollar. Now, why it has happened so has many reasons. One is a technical reason, that when we look at the value addition norm, so because if there is a duty-free export from India to ASEAN or from ASEAN to India, it will be duty-free only if the value addition norms are met. And value addition norm is 35%. When goods are moving, the red metal is moving, or any goods are moving from ASEAN to India, the value addition in ASEAN is looked at keeping all the ASEAN countries put together. So Indonesia is a major producer of copper concentrate, and this copper concentrate then goes to the other ASEAN countries where it is smelted, and then the cathode and wire rod and other products are made, and then it is exported to India. So there is a common value addition, the combined value addition, which is counted comes duty free into India, while in the FTA it was missed out. So the copper concentrate from Indonesia can be exported to India with payment of duty. So it created a situation wherein the ASEAN region was at a better situation. So exports increased, and it generally increased. But then there are other regions too, So ASEAN region has been a platform for travel of goods from third countries to India. And this is also true in view of the fact that China and ASEAN have very strong trade relations and trade agreement. And a lot of Chinese goods is also passing through ASEAN countries to India. Now, India has taken exception to this situation. Now, this trade agreement, which was entered into sometimes in 2010, is under review now. Only yesterday, there is a meeting of economic ministers of all the ASEAN countries, and India has started in Indonesia, wherein one of the agenda is also to review this trade agreement, which will be made more rational. So one, the anomalies of, for example, copper concentrate coming at a duty in India, such anomalies will definitely be looked into. But at the same time, there would be some countermeasures taken for circumventing the bypassing of the, bypassing the actual trade, the spirit of the trade agreement, and to stop the movement of the goods from third countries through ASEAN to India. There would be something provided in the new arrangement. Recently, the Indian Foreign Trade Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, very vociferously said that this trade agreement between India and ASEAN is one of the most ill-conceived trade agreements that India has ever entered into. So what I mean to say is there would be some radical changes in this agreement in the times to come, and these changes will be of two types. One, to make it more logical, rational. Second, to provide for the circumvention of the provisions to stop the ill practices.
Thank you, Mayank. That all may merit some watching. Does anybody else wish to comment on that? Does anybody? Oh, if not, I'm sorry, Mayank. Do you have something to add?
You are not properly audible. Can you repeat?
Well, I think we should maybe move on to another question, but this.
What was the third question?
Okay. No, I haven't gotten to it yet. My next question, I wanted to see if anybody else wanted to follow up on your comment, but I think you've covered it pretty well. I think policies get made for any number of reasons. When it comes to recycling and trading scrap specifically, it seems like whether it's non-governmental organizations or some faction of people pretty much came up with this notion that trading scrap across borders is shipping waste or garbage across borders. And it's hurt the trade pretty consistently and in a lot of different places. So I think my question for the panelists who wish to answer it is, to what extent does the industry still need to keep convincing government officials that recycling is a beneficial activity, especially when it occurs across borders, and it does not involve shipping garbage? So I don't know who wants to go first. I know, Reddy, I think you have an interest in this one.
So as far as the organized Indian recycling sector is concerned, it has actually done a lot to recycle the scrap in the way it should be recycled, in environmentally friendly way. Still, there are some sectors who are not so organized and have been recycling in not so environment friendly way in India. Now, this perception that scrap is being recycled in a pretty non-environment friendly way is more created by a lobby of the primary producers, which is very strong in India and has been doing so for an undue threat that they feel from the recycling sector. But as far as the organized recyclers are concerned, the recycling is happening generally in pretty environment friendly way. Now, to counter this, definitely MRAI has been doing, taking up with the government, uh, creating the awareness. It has already been doing that thing. Recent move from the government of India to bring standards on scrap was, part of this move from the primary sector, uh, which which was actually fought pretty with a vigor by MRAI, and MRAI has been to a great extent been successful in countering this. So this is a this will be a continuous building of perception which will be there, and uh, MRAI as a recycling association has to keep countering whenever such threat comes and through awareness sessions. At the same time, uh, suo motu we should also pursue to bring in, to ask the government to promulgate laws which require a cleaner recycling, which requires more stringent laws for a cleaner recycling. This will help change the perception.
Okay, thank you.
I'm adding like Magpie in additions. In my perception, this is the best way to develop the nation. I'll give you one of the example. If you talk about 30, 35 years ago, see the China, when they started the recycling, everyone said that, okay, the whole world dustbin is going to be China, right? And China took that advantage and he said, well, I'm taking the best materials or worst material to my country because I want to develop my nation. And they did proven right and they did it. Look at like if we used to go like 2005, 2007 to China, you find China all the time like, cloudy, look like, all the time rainy season is there. But they found that what exactly they needed as a raw material to develop the nation and country, they did it. When they found they develop it, because buying cheap and developing them know how to handle this scrap, putting like a right norms to be placed and see that how to handle those things. Everyone think this is a scrap, is going to be a waste for us. Let China take it, pay something and do whatever doing himself to do it. But China took the right decision. They used them on the right direction. They built their nation and they gain it. Finally, what we learned from the China, if really any nation wanted to develop himself to understand this recycling policy, learn from the China the way he did it. Okay, now I'm seeing my vision to see the India is going to be take the place. India is the next, the place where I'm seeing that this is going to do that. It's still a long way to go to understand the policy, putting in the place. See, as the government of India taken decision to put like end of vehicles after 15 years, right? For doing so, we have to put like a mechanical thing in place, saying that, okay, how to process this scrap. Once we know how to handle the scrap, the whole is going to focus to India. But going behind India, China, what it did, after having this all scrap, all recycling metal, they understand that they put it like, I must say, if we talk about steel, almost 16 to 17 million tons, 1600 to 1700 million is steel. They alone, they took 900 million. If we're talking about the copper, 25 million almost, the whole world doing the consumption. China alone, 12 to 13 million they're taking. So any metals, base metal you take it, you find China is taking more than 50% or 50% or gradually 50% plus and minus. What happened? After having this all investment into their country, they found, okay, now is enough. I invested in my country. Whatever I invested, I'm going to get this all as a regeneration, as a scrap. Now close all green fencing, all any shit from the outside, stop there, and I'll take my own country generation as a scrap, and the only new or higher grade copper or aluminum, I'll take it to the country because they build it. Now, I was speaking in one conference long time ago, and I said China will be one day exporter of scrap, and today the China is doing. So I salute the China the way he built it, and I'm saying the country who is going to take this recycling is going to get more beneficial than that. What are you thinking about environment, ESG, circular economy? I believe even saving energy and all those are the aspects where we can get more benefit.
Okay, thank you for that. those comments. Reddy, I think you had some comments on this topic, or would you still? No? Okay. Anybody else on the panel? Well, this might be a good time to open it up to audience questions. We have some microphones available, I think, from some MRIA staff members. So if you raise your hand, a microphone will find its way to you. If you have any questions about supply or demand or trading conditions as they are right now, I want to ask these panelists. Wow, we do have one.
Yeah, you were mentioning Europe in the beginning of the session and the changing regulations from Brussels. I think it's a big challenge because I'm from Europe and we see that we have to use the challenge by producing more end-of-waste material to supply, for example, China. And I'm also curious how this will influence the Indian market if Europe will produce more cleaner material, if we can. That's the challenge we have to prove. And how can we serve the South Asian markets with this?
Okay, so again, what does the panel see happening in the near-term future? And could you rephrase? What do they hope will happen, or what do they think will happen?
I think what will happen is that we have to produce more cleaner material, and if we have this clean material, where shall we use it? Because we can't use everything in Europe. We don't have the facilities for that yet. So if we produce clean scrap, end-of-waste resource material, how can India or Thailand, for example, use it?
Okay, very good. Anybody who wants to go first? I hope someone will address this.
So I suppose this new requirement or new regulation is aimed at reducing the carbon emission. And so the impact, this will have a direct impact on recycling because recycling is all about energy conservation. And a few European companies approached us in anticipation of the law, this regulation coming in, saying that we have to develop some system to show that whatever we are supplying is 100% recycled material. I have not gone into depth of this particular regulation, but what I understand from those discussions with a few customers is that a product which is 100% recycled and recycled in environment-friendly manner without actually creating a lot of greenhouse gases is it qualifies for not imposing those extra duties. Those are proposed under the new regulation. So what I say is this new regulation is actually going to be a boon and an opportunity for the recycling industry. And ASEAN countries and India being the centers of importing the scrap and processing and then exporting will be beneficiaries.
And I want to say something from the Middle East side, as Mayank Bhai already answered from the India side. Well, I appreciate European Union who made this system. We are used to buy a lot of material from Europe to Saudi Arabia, where our head office for our own mills, steel mill. And I was so happy to see the system and a standard in Europe where they are asking or they're making sure that what waste they are generating and shipping to anywhere across the world, making sure that the guys are really going to apply the right standard to produce in the right manner. So although Saudi and UAE I seen is higher standard they apply like American and European standard, I found many times the European is not able to ship, although despite the fact they wanted to ship, but the government is not allowed, like it's called like Environmental Authority, EAA. And now recently, I'll give you an example. I bought a lot of like UBC from UK and Europe. They all came to Saudi near border and they returned back again because Saudi government is not listening or they are not accommodating the request to apply and certify that what exactly UK required. So I believe you made a standard and I'm seeing the better chance if you keep pushing the way you're pushing to the whole world to apply it. So it's a great job you're doing. And I appreciate everyone have to incorporate this kind of thought process.
Yeah, I think there are some important points in both the question and the answer in that I've occasionally heard what's coming out of Brussels referred to as a ban, and I haven't really been able to find a whole lot of outright bans in any of the proposed or not yet fully fleshed out legislation or policies. I think a lot of it has to do with upgrading material, and a lot of it seems to have to do with permissions, a set of permissions to go back and forth. And I don't think it'll be surprising if in 2 or 3 years down the road, there's still plenty of scrap coming out of Europe, but it's just in a different form, and it involves a certain amount of paperwork, more paperwork than already exists. Any other questions from the audience? Please just raise your hand if so. And if not, I will, in the meantime, ask the panelists, specifically, I guess, because the MRAI has been nice enough to bring us all together, to ask a question specifically about that association. It could be something we've talked about, or it could be something we haven't really yet touched upon, but what do you see as the most critical work an association like MRAI can perform to protect and boost the industry and your own companies? And if everybody's willing to take a stab at this, or most of you are, I would like to hear some different thoughts on that. Jane, would you have a thought on this one? Or if not, let's go to the next person in line. Yep.
From my standpoint, working closely with ISRI in the U.S. Over the past couple of years, working with MRAI, I think from a governmental representational lobbying side, MRAI, ISRI, BIR really needs to be at the forefront to promote all the good things about the industry, and really be the tip of the spear for the PR wing of our industry. Because as you mentioned in your question about shipping garbage, that's really not something that's happening a lot anymore. I think a lot of broad strokes were made across the industry that shut a lot of that down, but still have some of that reputation lingering. So we would love to see from our side more involvement with PR campaigns and positive promotions with government entities to shed the light that we are a true green industry, not a industry shipping garbage.
For me, I don't have like a word to express my happiness to see the MRI, what are doing today. They are doing a great job, excellent job that, and based on my experience, understanding between MRI and government, MRI became a gateway of India, or gateway of the recycling business to explaining to government. If you look at like second largest consumer in the world, it became in India. And if you work like 10 or 15 years ago, you wanted to pass a message to anyone across the industry or government, nobody come forward to listen to you that what exactly you wanted to pass the message. MRI took place, he understands seeing after history, BIR, CMRA, and all big names who are really built their policy in place, like ISRI is one of the biggest one. They decided, why not? We are like, second largest importer or consumer in the world. We have to have policy in place where we can see that how our industry is working. And happy to say that if today any challenges is happening in India, MRI is taking the first step to go forward, talking to government, making sure that our voice has been listened. Voice has to be accepted, rejected, this is not a problem at all, but government has to listen as a body. MRI is a listed, and happy to share this information. Any program, what I've seen it so far, the government body is being approached, they came over, speak about their country, speak about this MRI. So for me, MRI done tremendous job, which really more than imagination, more than expectation.
Thank you, Jawed. Mayank, you'd like to add something, or one at a time? So whoever wants to, ready will go first, and we'll keep going down the line. Ready?
Excuse me, I just got one question I want to ask the MRAI team, personally, sorry. Because since MRAI hold a conference for many years, but just in India, what made this year to become Bangkok, Thailand? That is my question. Because I haven't seen any information from the website, but I'm really wondering.
Would someone from MRAI mind answering why you've selected Bangkok? Because we talked about it earlier, but we didn't get the why. So let's get a microphone to the appropriate person who's willing to tackle that.
Oh, why we have gone international this time? I mean,
we want to be international, let's put it this way. So when we talk about recycling, India is becoming the most favored nation right now to sell their scraps. And we want to be present everywhere now. If you want to sell to India, you have to come to India. Now we are going international, but lately I think everybody will come to India. We want to mark our presence everywhere. So that's the main reason. Thank you.
Thank you for the question and the answer. And now we'll...
To your question, so Javed Bhai rightly said MRAI has done tremendous job. And for last so many years in protecting the interest of the recycling industry in India and in actually promoting the recycling industry in India. But your question, what further MRAI should do to promote the recycling industry in India? And in India, the locally generated scrap, most of it actually goes in the hands of the unorganized sector. And if it is brought into the hands of the organized sector, the recycling industry in India will have a tremendous future. And for doing so, although there have been efforts from MRAI, it has already been doing, but if there is something to be done on two fronts, one is the biggest impediment is the local indirect tax, which we call GST, is 18% on scrap, and therefore it never comes in the hands of the organized sector because nobody wants to pay that 18%. And if that is done away with, and MRAI has already taken up with the government to reduce it to 0 or 2.5 or maximum 5%. If that is done, it will be revolutionary for recycling industry in India, is one. And second, on which MRAI has already been working and has succeeded to a great extent, but a lot has to be done yet, is EPR regulation, the extended producer's responsibility, in which the industries who are actually producing such items which later become scrap after end of the life have responsibility to collect those items and then either recycle themselves or get it recycled. So EPR law, for example, has been promulgated for lead acid battery scrap and for many other, for plastics also, packaging plastic. But there are many other fields which are remaining. For example, if I take the red metal, the cable scrap and electric motor scrap, etc. So if that happens, it will promote local scrap recycling industry to a great extent. So this is one part, and second part is about promoting the import of the scrap and recycling it would happen when the duty on customs duty on scrap is made to 0. So there MRAI has to fight with the primary producers. Always this is a continuous fight. But if that happens, would be great for the recycling industry.
Very well asked, Mayanji. I will like to update you that the recent calm events which has happened in the last 6 months, this has benefited us a lot, and government has understand the real requirements of our industry as well as our challenges. And MRI is continuously discussing with government for removal of custom duty, reduction of GST, as well as this EPR. I will tell you that already government has initiated a meeting in the last week for EPR on aluminum items. They have selected around 12 items in aluminum portfolio for EPR. Likewise, government will do for copper and other items also. So it's a matter of time, but not very far. So all these three works are being under progress only.
All right, thank you. And I think we've got another microphone in the hands of someone who'd like to make a comment or a question.
Hello, Mayankji, this is question to you regarding your duty, specifically to copper, right? So if you see Adani, they are coming in SEZ, so they are not at all bothered about whether duty is there or not. So the biggest challenge, rather than talking to government about working on duty removal on copper scrap, they will get all their raw materials duty-free without any documents to SEZ and easily can export it back. So I think when Amar talked about a lot of challenge for copper scrap procurement in India, the Adani is technically a very, very big challenge for us. So how do you think it should be addressed by you manufacturer in country?
Ultimately, when the moment Adani starts recycling, it becomes a recycling industry. This problem is for the smaller industries, definitely, so its impact have to be seen. All the scrap will be sucked in because they are coming out with a large capacity. So all the import will be sucked in by Adani. So other manufacturers will have their own problem. At the same time, there could be or would be a possibility of local producers supplying to Adani, as it has started for Vedanta. Now, Vedanta, who used to oppose recycling industry so much, during the time of this BIS discussion, suddenly you must have seen the Vedanta voice mellowed down, basically because they slowly started depending on the scrap. And we became one of the largest scrap suppliers to Vedanta. And one day we took up very strongly with Vedanta, what are you doing? If you are going to suppress us like this is going to work against you. It mellowed down.
So another vendor now, and they will pay you in dollars.
Vedanta is a recycling industry now.
You will get Adani as a second buyer for you, and
Could
they will
be.
pay
So
you in dollars.
how it shapes up, we really do not know, and how it changes the market dynamics is yet to be known. Of course, on the import front, there will be a pressure because they are going to have a large capacity. But how does the domestic front actually, on domestic front, how does the market plays? It really is to be seen. It could be in the benefit of the existing recycling industry. We have to see.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone in the audience who asked a question, who participated when asked a question. We're right about at 4 o'clock, which I think is a good time to sort of wrap up this afternoon's events. And as is customary, we'd like to present some gifts to the panel while thanking them. So I might call a name to come up on the stage. I've been asked to designate certain people to present gifts. And if I may, we'll start with Mr. Ashish, who would like to present a couple of trophies. Okay, right. I'm sorry. And also, okay, also a trophy for them. Mr. Jayant, would you please join us on stage? Mr. Jayant, to present a trophy to yeah. And also Mr. Navneet Chadha will present our final gift if he is here. Ah, there he is. Oh. And last but not least, we want to give one more reminder about next year, January 2024. If you watch the quick video presentation, a save the date announcement.